Always live on the free Odyssey app. I said, clean it up, clean it up. I said, we're gonna clean it up, clean it up. Clean up the ghetto. I love the ghetto. Ghetto is my home. That's where we live, where we live.
We're paying a birthday tribute to Kenny Gamble and Huff, Philly International, Message in the Music. And that was a message there about clean up the ghetto, where Kenny and Leon Huff were able to bring together a collaboration of some of their biggest entertainers in order to try to see what we could do decades ago. And I say we because Kenny called me and said, Sonny, we need to do something about clean up the ghetto. And I said, well, let's get it on. And what we were able to do is collaborate music, Philly International, with the Sonny Hill League. And we went out into different sections of the city of Philadelphia. And we had young people, primarily from my Sonny Hill League, with performers from Philly International to draw attention to what was going on at that time, decades ago. And I spoke to Kenny this past week, wishing him a happy birthday. And I say it to him all the time. And he says it back to me. What we going to do, man, about cleaning up the ghetto? Maybe we need to bring that back. With what's going on in our society at the present time and getting worse, we need all of the collaboration and all of the help and support that we can get. Because again, the message is always in the music. We're going to say good morning to Leland Hardy. Leland.
Morning, Mr. Sonny Hill. It's always a pleasure to be on the air here in the living room, sir.
You sound like the young guy that I took on the wing when what were you, about 15, 16, 17, something like that?
I hate to think of that time because I wasn't quite good enough to make the Sonny Hill basketball team, and I ended up having to learn other than basketball from you about life and about a commitment to our people, the likes of what you just discussed with that record, man. But yes, it was. It was around that time I was a young pup, and I'm just blessed that you did, in fact, see fit to take me under your wing and try to instill in me some of the values that you've been espousing for 50, 60 years now.
Woo! Woo! And guess what? It's always about life after basketball with an education. And again, I had some people on earlier. I was talking about it, Leland. I was talking about basketball. Basketball was not what the program is and was. It's about identifying with young people and then try to mold them into better human beings, but also preparing them for the real world, because you need education to be able to move forward, and you are a prime example of that. Leland, I wanted to get you on because you were the person that first and foremost had your hands on the Williams family, Venus and Serena, along with her father, in reference to building them. And you know what? I'm going back to education as we're speaking. We talked about this before when we were talking about Serena and Venus and the movie that came out about their family. But we were talking how the father and the mother, but primarily the father, was so identified with education for them that if they did not do what they needed to do from a tennis point of view or practice or whatever, that would be taken away. So we're leading into the fact that Serena Serena is following her sister who retired, or her sister semi-retired, I guess, but leading into the conversation about the fact that Serena is preparing to step away from tennis. The question that I pose to you, what does that mean?
Well, first of all, it means that her impact, Serena Williams' impact on the game of tennis, has had a seismic impact on all sports, and it has been a locus of young girls, particularly young girls of color, believing that they can rise above their circumstance and become great and can achieve whatever their dreams might be. So there were a host of opportunities around the ascendancy of those two young girls coming into a sport that I call one of the two last bastions of racial exclusivity in sport, that being golf and tennis. And her impending retirement, it shows a full life cycle of coming into the game and going out of the game, and hopefully young girls can be inspired, and men, boys, that they can compete at the highest levels and that they can achieve the biggest dreams that their minds will allow.
So when we're talking about what you are disseminating for my radio listening audience and how the game from a female point of view has progressed internationally, not just from an American point of view with minorities, but also from a financial point of view and from an identity point of view. Speak to that.
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, there were opportunities that were created, and some opportunities weren't maximized. So we need to speak on both sides of that. But let's just say, for example, when we came into the game and shocked the world, we did that by Venus making her professional debut against a woman by the name of Shawn Stafford, who was a top-ranked player. And Venus beat Shawn Stafford in straight sets. In her second match in that debut tournament at age 14, she played against the then number one ranked player in the world, Arantxa Sanchez Vicario, and she was up 2 sets or up 1 set and about to vanquish Vicario. And Vicario pulled an old school trick and ran into the bathroom, took a break, which is permissible, changed clothes on Venus, came back out. Instead of wearing white, she was wearing black. And Venus got spooked, sitting there, on the side, waiting 15 minutes for the girl to come out and so on. And she ended up not being able to win. But we did that without yet having an endorsement deal. So the issue was, it was a gamble that Richard took, and we discussed, let's go out here. If we show and prove that we are what we say we are, then the deals will be bigger. And that's what happened. So we went out there with no endorsement. Everybody saying we're crazy. She went out there and showed and proved, beating a top 50 ranked player in the world, and then almost beating the number one ranked player in the world at age 14. And then we were able to do big things. Similarly, I was able to do a similar thing with Serena. Talk about economics. When Serena was only 15 years old, before she had ever turned pro, and she was also the also-ran girl who we were hyping, we kept saying Serena will be better and bigger than Venus. I was able to secure for Serena the biggest endorsement deal of its kind when I personally resurrected the Puma brand, as you'll recall, which was lying dead after Clyde Frazier made it huge. And so I took Serena out to the biggest Hollywood movie producer in the world, Arnon Milchan, who's the founder and CEO of Regency Pictures, who, as soon as he bought an interest in the company, I had a message slipped under his door in a hotel room in Germany. And he said, how in the hell did you get to me? And I ended up saying, hey, I do what we have to do for our people. Ended up signing Serena to an eight-figure, all-cash deal before she ever touched the racket as a pro. And that spelled the kind of things you hear her talking about now about I'm going to transition from tennis into the venture capital firm that I started. Okay. And then move on to other things, the kind of what you talked about at the Sonny Hill Basketball League. Not just learning about basketball, not just learning about tennis, but what can you do after that will hopefully create major opportunities for people to come behind you. That's how this thing started. And if you know, Sonny, we came right into Philadelphia well before either girl was famous, really. Right before either of them had touched a racket as a pro. We gave a clinic right there at Long Knockers Driving Range in the heart of North Philly, 33rd and Oxford. And we were with you and you were with us. And we remain with you.
I was just so proud of the fact that you and I had bonded previously. And then to see you evolve into who you were at that point with the Williams family, but also how you evolved into where you are at the present time. For my radio listening audience, from an educational point of view, this man is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, where he has used his education and his ability to be able to explore and to interact with people in reference to where they want to go and how they want to get there, and to use that for the betterment of all those who are concerned.
Well, Sonny, I must say, you were a trailblazer in what you did, and I remember hearing, your power lies in your people ties. So taking some of the things I learned from being around the Sonny Hill Basketball Community Involvement League, and in fact, later coming back and owning a basketball team in your Baker League when I bought the Gilbert Hardy Esquires team to the league in homage to my late brother, Gilbert Edward Hardy, who was one of the country's preeminent lawyers when he met his untimely death at a scuba diving accident in Morocco at age 38 in 1989. I brought a basketball team into your league, and the same principles that you espoused and what we espoused to those young people in that basketball club. But I had the fortune of again taking some of those ideals. I went on to become the first black person in history and the youngest person in history to become a fellow at the #1 graduate business program in the world, which is the Lauder Institute. People know the name Estee Lauder of perfume fame. Each member of the family is worth tens of billions of dollars each. And they started an institute at the Wharton School and at the University of Penn, which they took.
No, don't slide over.
I hear you.
The Wharton School.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, and I have a young person, and this is going to come out as we'll tease something after one of your future commercial breaks here. But that program requires that you come into it with a minimum level of a certain high level of proficiency in at least one foreign language as you come into the program. Only the top 50 students from around the world are selected. 24 months, no vacations. And I came into the program in Chinese. And as you'll recall, working with some folk in Philly, including Elmer Smith, the legendary writer for the Daily News and for the Inquirer.
And let me just say this, one of the most proficient, knowledgeable people in all of boxing.
Oh, there's no question. At one point, Elmer Smith was the only full-time boxing writer at a major newspaper in America. Anyway, I'm sitting at home right there on the same street you live on 50th Street, watching Big James Broad Broad in a fight. And I'm sitting there with my main man, Kevin Hall, who also played at Central High School alongside Calvin Dixon, who was in your league. And
Calvin, one of my all-time favorite guys. Just talked to him a few weeks ago.
No question. So we sitting there watching the fight, and the announcer says, "Oh, here Ali just came into the room, and he's sitting ringside." And the other commentator, Vern Lundquist, says, "Yeah, Ali, I understand, is on his way to China to put on some exhibitions and do a goodwill tour. I'm going to be his interpreter. And they just started laughing and joking. They continued calling the fight. So I'm sitting there speaking, having the ability to speak fluent Chinese, and at the time being the reigning Pennsylvania State heavyweight boxing champion. And I said, I have to get with Muhammad. So anyway, that's a whole nother story, maybe a whole nother show.
Hold on to that because I'm saying commercial breakdown.
I got you.
You know what this is all about.
Yeah.
We'll come back with Leland Hardy, and we're talking about Serena Williams getting ready to step away from tennis. The 94 FM, the WIP Sports Radio time, 9:17. Speaker. It's 9:22 in the morning, and you're in the living room with Sonny Hill, and I have Leland Hardy, who was involved with the Williams family from the get-go. And Leland, I can still remember you calling me and saying, I have the Williams father and his two daughters, and they are the big doctors, and I want you to come out and just identify with them. And I said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we get the father, Mr. Williams, let's get him in the living room. And that was the beginning of my interaction through you of having Mr. Williams in the living room on a number of occasions. So we go way back with the Williams sisters. So the question that I raised with you is now that Serena is winding down her career, Venus, I think, is in semi-retirement. I don't think. Venus, has she decided to retire, or is she still doing exhibition?
Well, she's still playing some events here and there. She hasn't made a formal announcement of stepping away from the game yet.
You know what would be interesting as we're talking? The two of them standing there together and making an official announcement that they both are now finally stepping away from the tour, but there's a possibility that they may do exhibitions and things of that, as they think. So speak to that.
Yeah, that would be big. I think everyone, just as there's a career for seniors in golf, once you turn 50 on the PGA Tour, you can play in the Champions League on the Champions Tour, and so can you in other sports. So that would be big, and there's also a huge exhibition circuit, and people want to see them around the world. But let me talk about opportunities that were missed in this great assault on tennis that we have in the persons of the Williams sisters. Every girl of color, let me say, and many girls not of color will say to you that they got into the game of tennis because of Venus and Serena Williams.
Yes.
Absolutely no question about it. They got into the game because of them. However, as I urged, and some things weren't done, there should have been a Venus and Serena Williams tennis management. There should have been a situation where all the girls coming up, they would have a hand in guiding those girls' careers and a piece of the action from the Coco Gauffs and the others. But instead, you have somebody like a Patrick Mouratoglou, who is a guy who was Serena Williams' hitter and had some other involvements with her, ends up building a tennis empire on Serena's back. And the girls are not in the tennis management game, though they could have been far and away the preeminent players in that space, just as you saw LeBron James run into a Rich Paul because they happened to be wearing throwback jerseys at the bus stop one day back in Ohio. And now you see Rich Paul having seized upon that with the LeBron James puppeteering that whole move. And now Rich Paul has some of the biggest players in the NBA, and the NBA is getting real money. And now you see him about to move in to a $58 million home with Adele. All of that is the same type of model that could have been and should have been used by the Williams sisters. And unfortunately, that opportunity didn't happen despite urgings to that effect.
Well, the urging came from you and your thinking because you are a forward-thinking individual. And the reality that your forward thinking was too forward for the Williams family to really grasp and take a hold of and use it even beyond the greatness from actually playing tennis.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. And some that rubbed off and some things as, again, Serena making this part of her announcement. I'm moving on to the venture capital game. One of the young gentlemen who came after me at the Lauder Institute, who is one of the preeminent black venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, was able to get one of those investments from Serena's venture capital firm. So I take pride in all of those things. And again, it all stemmed from some of the things that I learned as a youngster, being around the Sonny Hill Community Involvement Basketball League. But let me parlay Serena's rise into another one of the two, what I call last bastions of racial exclusivity in sport, that being the sport of golf. So over the span, and I might have said this on your air before, but over the span of 20 years from Tiger Woods' entrance to the sport of golf until Tiger getting in trouble in the sport of golf and the entrance of Harold Varner III, Tiger Woods was the only black man on the planet Earth that had a PGA Tour card from his entrance in 1996 until 2017, 20-year span. Harold Varner came in and got a tour card. A couple other guys have gotten it. Over that same span, no black woman in history to this day has ever won an LPGA Tour golf tournament. We've had 7 black women on the tour, starting with my dear friend, the late Althea Gibson. So that brings me to mention a golfer whose family got interested in the game of golf, in part because of what was done with Venus and Serena Williams, and that's Amari and Alana Avery, the Venus and Serena of golf, out of Riverside, California. Amari Avery, who was just in the Philadelphia area playing as the second black woman in the history of the sport to play in the Curtis Cup, right out there, right off of City Line Avenue, 2 months or so ago, is the most decorated African-American female golfer in history. Now at USC, where she set countless records already, having only entered as an early entrant in January of 2022. So that inspiration from Venus and Serena has not only inspired young girls of color to get into the game of tennis, it has had ripple effects. So now we see a young lady and her sister, who's perhaps even better than her, just as Serena was better than Venus, coming into the game. In fact, Amari just played in the U.S. Amateur Championship out in California this past weekend. So we're in a situation where I predict, and I'm actually in the midst of what I call orchestrating the total takeover of the sport of golf by players of color, that it only takes 8 to 10 years to create a world golf champion from scratch. And we're going to start that right at Long Knockers, 33rd and Oxford, and the 33rd and Oxfords all over the hoods around the country. And the reason I say that is because the youngest player in history to make the cut at the Masters was only 14 years old, and that was very recently. Guan Tianlang, a Chinese kid, came in here playing against Tiger Woods and made the cut at the Masters at age 14 and a half. So we know we can go into our hoods around the country and create, in a span of 8 to 10 years, many Guan Tianlangs who can make cuts at Masters in only 10 years. And that's no time in the grand scheme of things. So we're going to be doing that as well.
But let me see how, from my perspective, Leland Hardy, it ties in. And it goes back to what you were saying on another occasion. Using tennis this time as an opportunity for education and an opportunity to build a foundation, as you have helped to build for the Williams family, where they are at the present time, by going into the underserved community where there's a tremendous amount of raw talent. And if you can take that raw talent, mold it into the kind of talent that you have been a part of and successful in doing with the Williams family, that also can be a formula for not only the tennis, but can be a major formula for education, which from my point of view is even more important than the accolades and the money that go with it, because with the education, it carries you a lifetime. And let me add this to it. With what's going on in our communities at the present time throughout the United States, we need more of that so that it grabs the attention of, and we use it for the right reasons. There's going to be a lot of people that use it for the wrong reasons. For the right reasons, to help mold another section of our community through sport. And then there's a responsibility upon them, and that is my other part of my conversation, which is always remember where you come from and remember to reach back so that the opportunities can be there for those who follow you.
Oh, there's no question about it. That brings me to a due and fitting recognition of a sports legend who espouses and believes those same and actually has exemplified those same ideals over a century of living right in Philadelphia. This gentleman who should need no introduction but does is named Herbert P. Douglas Jr., and he happens to be the world's oldest living Black Olympian and America's oldest living Olympic medalist. He was Jesse Owens' best friend. Jesse, of course, who shocked the world and defeated Hitler's Ubermensch falsity of white supremacy by going over there and winning 4 golds. This was Herbert Douglas's best friend and inspiration. When Herb was a little boy, he saw Jesse at a clinic. Jesse rubbed him on his head, said, "Son, you can be just like me." And he took that to heart and did that. So Herb Douglas, who lives right in Philadelphia, is 100 years old as of March 9th, 2022. And we just had a street renaming ceremony for him on July 29 at 3900 Ford Road, just off of City Line Avenue, just off of the Hilton Hotel where we celebrated your 80th birthday, if you'll recall. And we want young people to come by. We want young people to come by that intersection and to look at that sign and be inspired. And that man lives right there at 3900 Ford Road. So that is now Herb Douglas Way. So Herb went over in 1948, the first post-World War II Olympics, won a bronze medal for the United States, had to suffer all manner of injustices on the boat on the way over there to London to compete in those games. And all manner of injustices upon his return, despite having a bronze medal, I'm sorry.
We can't give him too much, Leland, because we had already decided that next week you'll be in the living room at 9 o'clock to be able to talk about what you just was able to give to my radio listening audience. And the key to all of this is if we don't get this information out, this information will fall by the wayside. So thank you so very much for being in the forefront of what has transpired with the Williams family, Venus and Serena in particular, and continue to be creative. Use that magnificent mind of yours, that drive and determination, and we'll look forward to Leland Harding talking about Mr. Douglas and bringing that subject to the living room, which we always enjoy to inform my radio listening audience. So thank you, my friend. I'll be talking to you during the week, and we'll get everything set up for next week at 9 o'clock.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
Talk to you during the week.
Yes, sir.